First story we're going to begin with is a story of someone that repeatedly had bad dreams, dreams that their father, who had passed away, came to the person and told him that he should baptize himself. And this was very strange. His father was Jewish. His father was a religious Jew. And he couldn't imagine how he was getting these dreams from his father, who had passed away, that he should baptize himself. So this individual went to Reb Zusha of Untitled, and he told him the story. And it wasn't one dream, it was continuous. He had it the second time, third time. And Reb Zusha of Untitled said, you know what? There must be some type of a symbol that fell into the grave of this person's father. And because of that, the person is coming back to him with this dream, because he has something buried with him, that like a cross or something, like, some other type of emblem that had to do with idol worship. So sure enough, they dug the grave, and they were able to find some coins that were in the grave that were actually had a cross on them. And when they removed these coins from the grave, he never had any bad dreams. And they told this story to the Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon was a big rabbi who opposed the Chassidic movement. And when they told this to the Vilna Gaon, he said, I'm not impressed with the story, because this is clearly a statement in the Talmud Yerushalmi. The Jerusalem Talmud says this somewhere. It's in the Jerusalem Talmud. But he says, what surprises me about the story is that Reb Zusha of Untitled, a Hasidic Rebbe, would know this Jerusalem Talmud. And just a little of somewhat of an insult to the Hasidim, but the non-Hasidim at that time, you have to understand, they were very against the Hasidim, and they felt they felt that the Hasidim were involving themselves in Kabbalistic teachings and without knowing all of the Talmud or knowing all of the commentaries on the Talmud. So that was one of their complaints. So the Vilna Gaon said about this story, he said, the advice that was given is no big deal. That's based on the statement in the Jerusalem Talmud. The surprising thing to me is that this Rabbi Zusha of Untitled knew the Jerusalem Talmud. So when it was reported back to Reb Zusha of Untitled, he said, well, the truth is, I didn't know that it was a Jerusalem statement from the Jerusalem Talmud, but I got it from the same source that the Jerusalem Talmud got it from. And that's the end of the story. So that's an interesting, it's an interesting story. Number one, I think the first point that we see from the story is that any connection we have with anything to do with idol worship could have negative effects on our mind and ask mommy. Yeah, ask mom. It could have negative effect on one's mind and one's thoughts, one's dreams. And I mean, in this story, the story was someone was buried. Their burial was there was a coin that had a cross on it, and that caused there to be these negative, these dreams of ordering him to baptize himself, which basically means that the father who was buried was having these thoughts, or having, it was affecting his soul. So this shows us how important it is. We have to be careful. As some people think, oh, I someone gave me this. It's a nice thing. It's a nice item. It happens to have a cross on it, but it's very valuable. You never know. These different religious articles, to a certain extent, could have prohibitions of us having them in our house. There is a statement in the Talmud. There is a statement. It's a verse that says, "Al tishkoin ba'oi halecha avlo." You should not have any crookedness in your dwelling. And the Talmud understands that to mean books of apikorsis, books of heretical books, or books of idol worship, and which includes maybe items that might have value, and you might think, oh, maybe I'll be able to sell these things one day, but the truth is that a person has to be careful, because number one, in their dwelling, they have these items, and they could have negative effects on one's health, on one's spiritual health for sure, and could cause dreams and who knows what type of terrible things and impact. So that's this on a very surface level, something we see in this story. Did you want to say something, Ben? Ben?
Yes, I wanted to know what was the rabbi they went to. What was the rabbi they went to and told him the story, and he said he's surprised that he
The Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon was surprised that the Reb Zusha of Anipoli would know a statement from the Jerusalem Talmud. You have to understand also that the Jerusalem Talmud is hardly learned, it's hardly studied, and to even have a copy of it was rare. Even nowadays, like people compliment me that I have a huge amount of svarim, of books, but I'll be honest with you, I don't have a full set of the Jerusalem Talmud. It's rare. People don't. It's not commonly studied, and especially going back 300 years, I don't know how many people even had a copy. So anyway, but there's just to shed a little light on why the Vilna Gaon said such a sharp comment. He was known to be against the Chassidim, but I don't. It is a little surprising that he said such a sharp comment. Yes, Yehuda.
Yeah, but the rabbi admitted that he didn't know the Jerusalem Talmud. So the Vilna Gaon was right.
Well, you have to understand, there is a statement in the Talmud, in the Babylonian Talmud, that says that you are allowed to lie when it comes to how much you've studied. And so if a person asks you that, do you know Tractate Shabbos well? You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to say, I never studied it. You don't have, there are three things you're allowed to lie about. And one of them is how much you know, how much your knowledge. So I don't know if I would agree that Rabbi Zusha of Anipoli didn't know the Jerusalem Talmud. These rabbis, they were humble, so humble, you can't imagine, and yet they were so knowledgeable. So it could be that he really did know the Jerusalem Talmud, and he studied it, and he knew it inside out. But he did say an interesting line. He said, I know it from the source of where the Jerusalem Talmud knows it from. Now, what does that mean?
Hashem.
But what does that mean? That he just had a revelation at that moment, or it was clear to him? It was something that was automatic? Did he have some type of a revelation, or was it something that was like sometimes something just to be that way, or was it and it just automatically was in his mind? There's no question about it, or was it something like, did he have some type of a revelation? Like what does this mean? I know it's Hashem. You're right, Yehuda. Hashem definitely revealed it to him.
Right. I don't know. So what was it?
We don't know. We're trying to figure it. I'm trying to ask you and all of my students over here to see if.
How do you think I would know it?
Well, it doesn't work that way. There's some things that you know that I don't know. There are some things I know that you don't know, and there are some things we both don't know, and some things we both know.
Well, I think there's more that you know that I don't.
Maybe, I don't know. It's only Hashem knows.
I do.
But Rabbi,
yes, Ben.
how do all the tzaddikim in your story know the answers?
Right.
They all know it. It's not just Zusha.
Right. That's true. All the
somebody
stories.
goes and asks somebody,
Right.
the person is sick or the person needs money, they arrange it that they get the money. So from the same source that Zusha got the answer.
Right. But it deserves a little thought, especially because he brings it out here. He says, I have it from the source of where the Jerusalem Talmud brings it out. It makes us think a little, like what really does that mean? I guess, just like the rabbis of the Jerusalem Talmud, Hashem, gave them the information, the knowledge, the clarity. So these tzaddikim, they also had that clarity, or they had certain revelations. Maybe when they were dreaming, maybe they would get these teachings and they would wake up with it, possibly. But it is an interesting way of wording it. You don't always think of it that way. I know it the same way the Jerusalem Talmud knows it. But the idea that
I loved Rabbi Zusha's answer. That he got it from the same source.
What do you love about it?
I thought it was a great answer.
He's sort of taking it a step higher.
Because it means that the rabbi, the Gaon of Vilna didn't know that he got it from its source. So the Gaon of Vilna was wrong.
Which also means that, there's two ways. What you're saying is very deep. I don't know if, if everyone understands the depth of this. There are two ways of knowing Torah. One is through seeing stuff in books and reading it and being able to repeat it. And then there's another way of connecting with the source on high. And even if you learn it inside the book, but you don't always apply it appropriately. And we don't always realize how practical some of the things we learn are. And we learn it and it becomes like an interesting piece of information, but we're not able to apply it. But when you're connected with it from high, in other words, if you're really connected to the source of the Torah study, in other words, you're learning solely for Hashem's purpose, and because you love Hashem so much, you're able to connect to a more global message of what you're learning than just specifically what you read. In other words, when you read it, it's a little hard to apply it to all different areas, but when you get it from Hashem, or when you're connected to Hashem, you're able to you see a much bigger picture. You see of this teaching, you see how it applies in many areas. Yes, Yehuda.
Yeah, well, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov followed the Torah before it was given, and Moshe also.
Right.
So that's 4 examples of what you're talking about.
Right, definitely. Good point.
I'm sure there's others also.
And
those are the 4 that come to mind.
That's a very good point. Yehuda is emphasizing that.
The Baal
if
Shem Tov.
you think about it, just one second, Ben. Yehuda is emphasizing that if you think about it, the patriarchs, they weren't studying a book of Torah. they had, more of a spiritual revelation connection to Hashem that gave them direction of how to do things and how to
Rabbi,
do things properly. Ben wanted
Rabbi.
to say something. Yes, Ben.
Yeah, I wanted to say the Baal Shem Tov had the same kind of knowledge. He would pass by a grave and he would tell you, oh, this and this person is buried here.
So
Without looking
prophecy,
at the grave.
yeah, but prophecy and divine revelation is one thing, but here we're connecting it to the study of Torah, that the actual Torah study is linked to to Hashem rather than just studying in depth and trying to come up with insights and see things deeper. You're actually closely connected to Hashem, as it says in Tanya that when you study Torah, you're reaching the highest level. But if we study for the right purposes, we're able to allow that to reveal itself, express itself much better. Yes, Robert.
I hope you can hear me because I'm in a public area and I have a mask on.
Well, thank you for joining us, even though you're in a public area.
No, I love this. One of the things, I've been reading books, sort of an introduction to study. And one of the things they say, other people read, but we experience. So there's a difference between reading, and which is passive in its way, but then experiencing is understanding the full depth of Torah and the interpretations, and how generations after generations, as you and I and all of us now are doing it, every year we come in contact with those who preceded us and continue, not the argument, but it is an argument, and in understanding the writings. And so every generation we do this all over again because we're part of that continuum that happened thousands of years ago, and that's our link. And as generations following us will also have that experience, not just reading, but understanding and sharing. And that's the beauty of what we are doing now.
Very interesting point that Robert is making about the difference between studying and reading versus experiencing. And that's really what these great rabbis were able to, they sort of felt it. It wasn't just going in the mind. It was, as we say in the davening, Kol atzmoisai toimarna. All of my limbs are speaking the words of Hashem, sort of like where our entire being is experiencing this teaching. Yes, Miranda.
Okay, so the way I heard it when you said the end of the story is that Rabbi Zusha was doing a comeback to the Vilna Gaon because he was saying, well, that's from Yerushalmi, but I'm surprised you know it, and he's saying, well, but that the fact that he got it from the same source is kind of like he was trying to emphasize that it all comes from Hashem anyway, that we're all together. And maybe he wasn't being that nasty, I don't know, but it sounded that way to me. But also it implies that he considered the Vilna Gaon part of his community as well, because he was implying Hashem. And so he was saying Hashem has that for all of us, kind of a thing. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. He was wielding kindness and also a zippy, kind of thing.
So you're emphasizing the fact that there's some type of a unity that he was bringing out, that we're all in this together and we all get it from Hashem. Right. I sort of understood it a little to be your Torah study, a little like what Ben was saying, that your Torah study is limited to what you read, and our Torah study is connected to Hashem, and we we see everything. We see the entire spectrum of Torah, not just what we're seeing here and what we read specifically, but how it applies in all areas. There's a statement in the Pirkei Avos, Ethics of Our Fathers, that says that the King David studied Torah from Achi Taifel. And he studied, he called Achi Taifel two words, three words, Rabbi Alufia Yudai. He said, like, you're my teacher, my master, my commander. And the Mishnah in Ethics of Our Fathers says, if King David only studied two things from Achi Taifel, and he called him these words of praise about it being his teacher and his master, how much more so if we study one thing from someone, how much more so do we have to give that person honor? So the question is, I don't know if you study one thing from someone if you have to give him honor. King David studied two things and he gave him honor. If you study one thing, you have to give him honor. I don't know. Is that how much more so? I would say if you study three things, how much more so you have to give him honor, but not if you study one thing. And so one of the explanations that's given is that Achi Taifel was not a righteous person. He had known a lot of Torah, but he wasn't considered righteous. He was involved in a rebellion against King David, and he wasn't question if he gets Olam Haba, the world to come. He was not considered righteous, even though he knew a lot of Torah. So his Torah study that he learned was not done for the right purpose. So he only learned what he learned. But when you study Torah and you learn one thing from your friend, you're not learning one thing. You're learning that one thing, but you're connecting to all the other areas of Torah, because if you learn for the right purpose, you connect to Hashem, and you're able to connect, to apply what you're learning and see other areas of Torah from what you're learning. And therefore, when King David learned two things from Achi Taifel, that's much less than when you learn one thing from someone. Because when you learn one thing from someone else, but you learn with the right purpose, you're connecting to Hashem, you're connecting to the source. You've got all of the teachings of the source with you. You've got all other areas, and therefore your teaching, your studying of one thing could be worth much more than King David's studying of two things from Achi Taifel. That he only got two things while you're getting a million things when you're hearing one thing, but you're really getting many, many more. Now I see that brought up a lot of questions here. Yehuda, would you like to ask something on that?
Yes. So you're saying, what I got from that is you're saying that King David did not learn the right way.
No. God forbid. King David had heard two things from Achi Taifel. What did he get from Achi Taifel? Only two, because Achi Taifel studied for the wrong purpose. He gave over two things. Now, King David might have gotten much more, but from Achi Taifel, he only got those two things. What Achi Taifel could give him. Achi Taifel gave him only two things. But when someone else teaches you Torah, they could be giving you, they could have so much, they're connected to the source, so they're able to convey that, the continuum to you. In other words, they deserve credit only if they connected to the infinite levels of the Torah. Then they deserve credit. Otherwise, they're only giving you two pieces. They're only giving you what they taught. But if they connect to the infinite, they're giving you over more.
But King David learned for the right reason.
Right, but he didn't have to give credit to Achi Taifel for that.
Well, but the tradition is that you have to give credit where credit is due.
But the credit is due for only two things that Achi Taifel taught him, because Achi Taifel didn't teach him more than two things.
Okay.
But even though King David, when he studied, he now connects to Hashem's infinite levels. But what did he deserve? What did he owe to Achi Taifel? Only two things, because Achi Taifel only taught him two things. When someone else teaches you Torah and they connect to Hashem's infinite levels, they're giving you over more than two things. They're giving you what they're teaching you, but they're giving you, together with that, any connections of that teaching to the infinite levels of Hashem. So what you're taking from them, or what you might be taking from them, is a lot more than the one thing that you're learning, that you're learning from them.
Thank you.
It's a good question. Yeah, it's interesting. You have to think about it. It
right.
deserves a little more thought. Yes, Ben. Ben.
I wanted to say there is a difference between us and King David. King David doesn't have to give him more kavod than we do. He owes him less because he's a king. And he's a more righteous person than me. So for me, learning one thing that's more important to me than it is two things to King David.
I would have to look up and see what the other commentaries say.
You know what I mean?
Maybe what you're
because
saying.
The kings at that time, they were not giving.
It's an interesting thought. Ben wants to say another answer.
No, because
yeah, it sounds interesting. But Ben is saying that the king, when King David learned something from Taifel, so he needed to have two things in order to really give him respect. But for us, even learning one thing, because King David was a king, he really didn't have to give much respect. But how much more so us if we learn one thing from someone? But I'd have to look up and see if any of the commentaries mention that. It sounds like an interesting answer. I don't know. Maybe it sounds good. Sounds good. Okay, Miranda.
Yeah, what came to mind is, I don't know if this is correct learning, but I learned that King David only had a Yetzer Tov. He overcame his Yetzer Hara, and so perhaps his kavod he was giving to Taifel had to do with wanting to give some encouragement, maybe even to Taifel, to raise himself up. Hey, move on up, come on and get with the program. Maybe I don't know, because I don't. I haven't overcome my Yetzer Hara yet, so
Right,
but maybe someone on that level would want to help raise somebody up and give them COVID.
COVID-19.
No, not COVID.
Kavod.
Kavod. Sorry, I'm not
COVID too.
It actually says that Achitofel died from choking. Maybe he did got COVID.
Oh, hopefully not.
Rabbi, if this is what you give your friends, I don't want to know what you give your enemies.
Rabbi?
Yes, I don't know who you are, but I heard.
Penina, it's Felice.
Oh,
Felice.
Yeah. Okay, I don't see you, but yes, okay.
Oh, I'm not on the.
Okay, no problem. It's like a heavenly voice, a bass coil. It's like a heavenly voice that I'm hearing. Okay.
No, I was thinking, like what Miranda said, especially since there was obviously couldn't have been the best of feelings between King David and Achitofel, yet because of King David's Yetzer Hatov, it seems to me, at first I was thinking of it in terms of a political thing, but actually he was really trying to encourage him to see things in a different light. So he gave him credit for what he did do and the beneficial influence that he did have on him. And it would remove the okits, it would remove the whatever bad feeling, and it could encourage Achitofel to learn more and get closer to Hashem himself.
Thank you, Phyllis. Yeah, I should just mention, Phyllis, you must have maybe two, I think you have two computers near each other or something, because we were hearing both from you. But yeah, so Phyllis, you want to say similar to what Miranda was saying. So very nice, both of you. I think what both of you are saying is definitely correct. I'm sure David HaMelech would have loved bringing others to tshuva. In fact, one of King David's main jobs in this world was to teach us the power of tshuva. That's why he ended up sinning with Bathsheba, was really not because he should have, he fell into this trap with Bathsheba. It was really to teach people how how powerful tshuva is. So for sure, it would have been in his greatest desire to help people elevate to do tshuva. So there's no, so for sure that it sounds like a, something that he would have wanted to do. The only thing is that the Talmud says if he called him Rav, Alufai, Rabbi, Yudai, if he called him these terms, it does teach us something, which means that he must have felt obligated to use these terms. maybe three terms, maybe, you know, the reason he used three maybe was because he wanted to inspire him. But the concept the Talmud, you know, the Mishnah takes and says, we see that we also should be honoring someone who teaches us even one lesson in Torah. Okay, in any event, going back to the stories. Okay, does anyone else want to say anything about this story of the of this cross that was buried and causing the son of this deceased to have bad thoughts, have thoughts that he's supposed that his father was telling him to convert? Any other thoughts on this story? Okay, I guess we can move forward.
I wanted to tell that Reb Zushia, his brother Reb Elimelech, on this past Friday was his yard site. Reb Elimelech Blazensk.
This past Friday, wow. Rabbi Elimelech was famous for writing a sefer called the Noyam. Besides being a great Rebbe, he also wrote a tremendous book called the Noyam Elimelech, widely studied by Chassidic Jews. But these were two brothers that were powerhouses. They were powerful Chassidic Jews in their own ways. Rabbi Zusha was very humble and simple and poor, and Rabbi Elimelech was more of a majestic, dignified leader, having, you know, many followers and you know, in each of their ways, and they used to travel together. So it's interesting how you see how some people, their mission is to be, you know, to do things in one way, and other people are to do things another way. You know, it's interesting. There's always a debate among the fundraisers. Is it better to come to someone collecting money with a torn shoes and with, you know, you look like you could use another new hat, and your coat looks like it's, you know, it's all rubbed out and worn out, you know, and you come with an old car that's making noises and bouncing away? Or is it better to come in a, you know, nice suit, and you look like a mensch, you look like you just bought a new house, a new car, a new hat, and the car looks pretty new, you know, 2021 car, and you pull up and you have your presentation and your whole thing. It's a whole debate if that's the way to you know, what's the better way to fundraise. And I always say it depends on who you're fundraising from. If you're fundraising from poor people, then better to look like a shlub, a shmata, and you'll do well. They'll feel bad for you. If you want to fundraise from wealthy people, you have to look like a mensch. They want to relate to you. But anyway, this is you know, it's almost, you know, you think of Reb Zusha and Reb Elimelech. They you know, they had different missions. They had different missions in life, and both of them were great tzaddikim, tremendous, holy of holies. So now comes the next story.
I'm sorry, which one had the yard site?
Which one's the yard site? Reb Elimelech.
Reb Elimelech.
Yes. So the next story is the story of Reb Meir of Premishlan. And Reb Meir of Premishlan, he would go to the mikveh every day, as was customary and is customary among Chassidim. They go to the mikveh, and before they pray, before they daven every morning, it's customary to go to the mikveh. They want to daven with pure thoughts, and you know, my understanding is it's not just pure thoughts from any, you know, any sexual thoughts, but it's also pure thoughts from anger, from jealousy, from any negative traits that they might have. Mikvah, at least from my understanding, it's a way of purifying ourselves before Hashem and having a pure mind. So Rabbi Elimelech would go to the mikvah every day, and the mikvah was situated.
This is Rabbi Meir.
I'm sorry, Reb Meir of Premishlan. Thank you for correcting. Reb Meir of Premishlan. He would go to the mikvah, and the mikvah was situated on top of a mountain or on top of a hill and there was a huge steep slope in order to get to this mikvah. And most people, when they traveled to this mikvah, when they would go to use the same mikvah, they would, at least when it was slippery, when it was snowing and it was ice and muddy, they would never go directly up the hill. They would somehow take a roundabout route in order to safely arrive in the mikvah. But Reb Meir of Premishlan, for some reason, he would always go the steep, slippery route, and he never fell. He would take that slippery route, the ice, didn't matter, ice, snow, mud, leaves, rain. He walked straight up this steep slope, and he would go and dunk in the mikvah. So there were two members of the Maskilim. The Maskilim were the original Jews that decided we don't like orthodoxy. About 300 years ago, the only type of Yiddishkeit was Orthodox Yiddishkeit. There was no such thing as, well, we're going to do half, we're going to do some of these, we're going to pick and choose. So right when it was starting out, it was called the Maskilim, the intellectuals, the enlightenment. And thank you. And so these so there were two Jews that were Maskilim, and they of course wanted to question these holy rabbis. So they said, it can't be that this is dangerous and this is a miracle, impossible. I bet we could do that. We could probably, obviously, if Reb Meir of Premishlan was walking up this steep hill, we could do exactly the same thing with there can't be any miracle. There's no such thing as miracle workers and so on, and these holy Jews, and our enlightened form of Yiddishkeit is just as good as his. And so they said, we are going to do the same thing. So but they wanted to see, so they waited for a snowy or an icy day, and they watched him do it. And they said, yep, it must be, if he's doing it and he doesn't fall, we'll do the same thing. Guess what? So they went and they decided, they waited for him to, he got into the mikvah. They went up this steep slope, and they both got terribly wounded. And they fell, they slipped, they broke bones. Anyway, so after one of them got better, after maybe months of rehab, finally got the courage to go and ask Reb Meir of Premishlan. He said, what is the real secret? How do you do it? Because you have to understand, I mean, it's crazy. How was he able to do it every day in the snow and the rain and he always just walked straight up with not falling once? So he said this line, he said, if you are tied up on high, if a man is tied up on high, he doesn't fall below. And he said, Meir is tied up on high, and therefore he doesn't fall below. That's the end of the story.
Wow.
So what do we learn from this story? I'm not advising you.
I didn't catch it. If you are tied up on what? I didn't.
On high. High, H-I-G-H, high. If you're tied up on
okay,
high,
thank you. Okay.
then you don't fall below. And
If I sound like a news broke, who is elevating you?
obviously, that, he's on a different level of nature than we are. So for him, normally a person is not supposed to rely on miracles, which really is a question on this entire story. How was Reb Meir allowed to do what he did? You're not allowed to rely on a miracle. It's a mitzvah to go to a doctor if one is sick. It's a mitzvah to, you have to do things in the normal way. It's a mitzvah to go to work. Don't just rely on Hashem is going to supply you with money. You have the mitzvah to go to work and actually support one's family and so on. These are, it's clear that you can't just, you have to do things at a practical level. Yes, Miranda.
Okay, so maybe Rav Meir was so high and such a tzaddik that he didn't think going up.
We can't hear you now. Something just happened to your sound. I don't know why we can't hear you, but what Miranda is saying is something to the effect of he's such a tzaddik. Yeah, we can't hear you. I don't know.
Not tzaddik.
Oh.
Do you want me to start over again?
Yeah,
or can
he was such a tzaddik.
Okay, so he was such a tzaddik that he didn't consider this a miracle. It was just a daily event for him. But to us who aren't so high and aren't so tzaddik, so on that level, to us, it's really a miracle because it's impossible for us to do. But for him, and what I've heard, and I don't know if this is true either, that tzaddikim didn't really rely on miracles, but miracles happened around them all the time. It was like it was just part of their life. They didn't consider it a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what else to say.
Right. Yeah, I mean, definitely along those lines. I just don't know how to specifically answer the question by hitting the nail on the head. Like, what is the exact heter, the exact leniency? He's a tzaddik, correct? And for him, somehow this was not, I don't know how to word that. This was not a miracle for him. Like, what exactly, how do you understand that? Maybe we have some helpers over here, some other ideas. Anyone? Yes.
Well,
Miranda?
he did it every day. So if you do something, you fry an egg every day, that's not a miracle or something.
Yeah, but I don't mind if he did it in the summer, but once the winter comes, to me, that's a miracle. And the first time it's prohibited to do it. And so if he did it for 10 years and then you say, well, now it's not a miracle, for some reason I never fall, then I understand. But what about the first 10 years? Was he sinning the first 10 years that he did it, the first 10 winters that he did it? Obviously not, for Chas v'Shalom to say such a thing. But, in other words, your explanation would work to explain his later years when he did it. But I'm asking in the beginning, how did he do such a thing? If it was, a question of relying on a miracle. And,
I don't think he relied on miracles. It was just, he was so high, he didn't fall.
Right. So it's something along those lines. Yeah. Just hard to put into the exact legal terms what made it allowed. Yes, Yehuda.
To answer what Miranda said, when we received the man in the desert, they didn't consider that a miracle because it happened every day. When they got to Joel and the food grew from the ground, that they considered a miracle.
So I think that's a very good point. Let me mute everyone because there's background noise. So Yehuda's bringing up the fact that when something happens every day, it's not a miracle, and which Miranda was also mentioning. But and he brought a proof like the manna. When it happened every day, they got used to it. The thing is that I'm surprised that Reb Meir was allowed to do this the first few times when it was raining and when it was icy. He should have automatically realized that this is prohibited to do because this is dangerous. But I guess what you're saying is that you're allowed to do something once until you see how dangerous it is. And since he didn't fall, in other words, that's the way you're understanding it. I guess that's what you both mean to say, that he didn't know how dangerous it was until he went. He went and it was icy and he didn't fall once. He didn't feel at all it was slippery. Somehow he got over it the first time. And once he got over it the first time, he realized, for him, he realized that on his level, obviously this is not anything dangerous. Okay, so that's what you mean, that he did it once and in order to test the waters. And maybe he was extra careful when he did it the first time, and he didn't seem to have any, there was no issue. So that's how he was allowed to. Okay, that's an interesting thought. Thank you, Yehuda and Miranda. Ben, I can't hear you. You're muted.
I want to give a more simple answer. He probably did it every day when he went praying. He didn't always pray only in the winter. He was doing it all year round. So he knew what point he's going up, and he knew which way he's going to go up without slipping, because in the summer he saw which way to go.
Okay. I mean, I don't think it's knowing where to go what that helps you. I think it's the ice. Yeah, I think the ice is what causes a person to slip and fall. I mean, ice. Have you ever gone ice skating? You know, and if you ever walked in the ice, it's quite dangerous.
Yeah, I have mine.
You never know how the ice is going to freeze up. Yes, Moshe. Moshe, you wanted to say something, Moshe?
Yeah, it's quite clear that he must have been on a very high madrega, you know, in order to climb the ice. Because you see, a person who's maybe not on a higher madrega, you know, they sometimes tend to be a little bit more clumsy. You know, they may have things on their mind that it might be distracting to them, and the concentration and the focusing process of climbing up ice. A person on a very high madrega, you know, and they have a tahara thoughts, you know, they might be able to move up that ice, you know, more gracefully, you know, so to say, you know, that he probably had that ability. It was more refined. There was more refinement. He had more of a, he was on a higher madrega, in other words, you know, he probably, as opposed to somebody who maybe, you know, was not quite on that madrega, and he might, you know, be more wobbly, you know, might go in a different direction, but, you know, maybe had less averot in his, on his cup, you know, so to say, you know, and, you know, so he probably had that ability to do things, maneuver within a sphere that others are not able to do. You know?
Okay. Thank you, Moshe. Yes, Gloria.
Maybe he was the only one in that village that owned shoes with cleats on the bottom.
I think they would have checked that out. I think the you know, the Enlightenment people, they know better about cleats than Mayor did. Yes, Gloria. Yes, Andrea.
Thank you. I think God provided the cleats. I think that, you know, as I don't know who said it just before, he was in a higher level. He was focused other places, and, you know, this was where he had to go. That maybe was the shortest route up. And that was part of his, you know, accomplishing what he sets for himself during the day. He needed to go take the mikveh before his day started. And he just was focused on Hashem, and Hashem, or whomever helped him accomplish what he needed to. I don't think he thought too much about it. He just did it.
Right. Okay. Well, my thought is that there must be some level of nature that a tzaddik, he falls into different rules of nature, and therefore it's not considered a sin for him to rely on this type of a miracle or on that. Like he says, I'm tied on high, so for me this is not called relying on a miracle. Now, it's hard to explain because I don't know how to specifically, you know, deal. We all are saying the same thing, that, you know, he was a tzaddik, and he's, but there must be some type of a rule for a tzaddik that because he's a tzaddik, and on his level, like, he's allowed. This is not called a miracle because for him, like, Hashem told him, this is fine for you. Like he had some type of a revelation from Hashem, like, you're, you know, for you, that's not dangerous. You know, if for some person it's not dangerous, it's not, you know, it's not dangerous for them. Somehow Hashem like gave him certain things like that. That's easy. That's not your issue. And but it is interesting, the term he uses, that if you're tied on high, and this story was repeated, I think, by the Lubavitcher Rebbe a number of times. I think I saw it written in the Sichos, which implies like there might be some lesson for us that we could have that ability to be tied on high, or by always feeling connected to Hashem, that you don't end up falling into different traps of inappropriate places because you're tied on high, or do that a person always, I don't remember the exact context where it was brought, but this idea of being tied on high, which I think referred to always connecting to Hashem and thinking about Hashem, we can be tied on high. We don't have to worry about falling down below. Okay, any other thoughts on this story? Yes, Ben. We can't hear you. You're muted.
Maybe we can compare it to Jacob's ladder, that his ladder was connected up high. And he was asked to climb the ladder. He didn't want to, but Rabbi Meir wanted to go to the mikveh, so he did go up.
I'm not familiar with the story that Yaakov was asked to climb the ladder and he didn't.
No, to climb on the ladder. He saw the angels going up and down, and he was asked to climb. He says no, he doesn't want to climb.
I don't know that.
He was afraid that he won't be allowed to come back down. I heard that story, that he's not allowed. He was afraid he would not be allowed to come back down
if he climbed. Interesting. Andrea, do you know of that midrashic statement that he was afraid to? Anyone else who's a master of medrash here that would maybe know such a familiar with that, with the ladder of Jacob, that this additional point about going up on high?
I think it's Rashi.
Rashi brings
in the
that,
Stone edition.
Oh, in the Stone edition? So it's not Rashi. One of the commentaries maybe in the Stone edition mentions that additional point that he
commentary on about it.
That he didn't want to go up on high because he was afraid on the ladder. He was afraid he wouldn't come down. That's interesting.
No, he was afraid he will not be allowed to come back down.
Right. A lot of
Hashem will want to keep him up.
Okay. Anyway, interesting. Okay. I think Robert, you wanted to say something, or no?
No, I do. I think part of what happened with him when he was on high is now the rabbi had an elevated consciousness. And by that, as you said, within your interpretation is there are areas where it's not a miracle. Something happens because of our elevated consciousness and our closeness to the Holy of Holies, to Hashem. And subsequent to that, there is a lack of fear or the consequence of doing something that'll hurt you because of, again, by being again, an elevated soul and who he was. And he did this on an ongoing basis. So clearly there was something protecting him that we would not otherwise have as protection because of we're not as elevated as he is in how he lives his life.
Okay, well said, well said. I just want to emphasize this idea that I think we are all, I think I've seen this brought down to the effect of that we have the ability to follow in this way, like somehow being tied up on high, so this is a little encouragement, motivation, and inspiration that we should always try to feel connected on high, and then we don't have to worry. Okay, and then let's see, we have 4 minutes left. The next story is a story of a chassid of Rabbi Yisrael of Ruzhin. Rabbi Yisrael Ruzhin had a had a chassid who used to travel and transport wood to a city called Danzig. And so Rabbi Yisrael of Ruzhin asked him, he said, when you travel to this city, which, this city is a city, Danzig was a city that was very unsneous. People were immodest there. People would walk around in bathing suits and with, sleeveless and maybe, all different immodest people would, it was maybe, I don't know if it was a beach town or something, but it was people dressed immodestly. And there was a lot of, inappropriate things going on there. Maybe the billboards weren't so modest. And anyway, so Rabbi Yisrael Ruzhin asked him, he says, where are your thoughts more pure? When you travel on business to this place called Danzig, or when you are at home in your little village, which is full of religious Jews who are modest and keep Torah and mitzvahs. So this chassid, he said that it's very surprising. He says, for some reason, my thoughts are more pure in Danzig than when I'm at home. In my hometown, somehow other thoughts come to my mind. When I'm on business in Danzig, somehow my mind is very pure. So Rabbi Yisrael of Ruzhin, he told him an interesting answer. He said, you know why that is? Because when you're in a city of unholiness, so the holiness there, it finds itself to be like lonely, finds itself to be lonely. And it tries to cling on to you where it finally has someone who will appreciate it or accept it, because no one there wants the holiness. So holiness is like lonely in the city of Danzig, and somehow, therefore, when you're there, it attaches itself to you, and you have no problems. Here, holiness is well sought after, and therefore, you don't. It's not clinging to you. You got to sort of search after it and seek it out. So that was his answer, which is, I must say, a little hard to understand. What does that mean? There's a concept of holiness that sort of is looking for you. It attracts itself to you. I mean, there's always an evil inclination. Don't. Rabbi Yisrael of Ruzhin was not saying there's no evil inclination. There is. But somehow, sometimes if you're alone in a city, they're all non-religious Jews or they're all non-Jews, and they don't, somehow you have maybe extra spiritual energy there. That's what it seems like. You'll have more spiritual energy. The levels of holiness there, I guess, are attracted to you. While you're in your regular city, you don't have that. They're not attracted to you. You sort of have to work on them. Yes, Yehuda.
I'd like to propose another interpretation.
Yes. I would like another interpretation. I'm not satisfied with what I said. Yes.
That he had to be on guard in the other city because there was so much tumah there. But at home, he didn't have to be on guard because there was relatively less tumah there.
Right. I like that. I like what you're saying. The only thing, I didn't really give much explanation. I was sort of just telling you the story the way it's said.
Right.
So according to the words that he said, it was a little hard to fit your explanation into those words. As he was claiming that the holiness clings to you, what it should say is you're more on guard and you're more careful. Here,
Right.
it makes it sound like somehow the holiness somehow clings to you because it's hungry for a yid, for a frum yid. It's hungry for someone who's going to keep Torah. It's like hungry for you. So your explanation is a great explanation. I'm not sure if we can fit it into the words, but anyway, it's good. It's good. It's definitely a thought, and I think you're right. I think that is one of the reasons. I'm trying to figure out the other reason that he seems to say, and it's not so simple the way they word it, the way it's worded in the story.
Well,
yes, Robert.
I'm
sorry, Yehuda. Yes, Yehuda. What were you going to say?
I don't think either one is a contradiction of the other. I think it's all part of the same.
Okay. Maybe, yeah. Maybe if you could fit it in, yeah. I think that's good if you could fit it in, yeah. Okay, Robert.
An extension of what Yehuda said and what you said is, when the gentleman was back home, everybody was religious. No one had to be on guard. So the whole milieu was comfortable and understood to be, you're at home. Once you leave your milieu, you're the only one. And because of that, consequently, the intensity of the vacuum you are now in is, again, greater than if you were home, because you see what's happening around you, and it's the opposite of being at home. And because of your experience and who you are and your values, you know you have to fight against it, or you have to put it within its perspective of where you are so it doesn't corrupt you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, along what Yehuda was saying, you just elaborated.
It's all part of that continuum of interpretation.
I like that. Yeah.
Rabbi?
I like this point. You know what? Our time is up, but I'd like to continue discussing this story. So if you don't mind, write down your thoughts on this story. And when we pick up next week, Metz Hashem, on Sunday, we're going to continue discussing this story. So please write down any of your thoughts on the story and save it for next week. Okay?
I just wanted to mention that Danzig,
Phyllis, I got to run. But write it
German
down.
Town.
Write it down, Phyllis, all right? Sei gesund, everyone. Have a wonderful day. And we'll see you, Metz Hashem, tomorrow. Phyllis.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Please write it down, Phyllis. I don't want to cut you off. I want to discuss it.
Thank you.
Thank you.